So the light that's radiating out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Of the
From
three
the
places, from the three places.
Okay, right.
Encapsulating each other.
Right.
Is the mouth on the most outer sheath, or is it all just one light?
The mouth is enclosed within the light of the mouth, absolutely. And now it's only the mouth that is so to speak revealed.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. So those other two lights are kind of like the soul, and the light of the mouth is now the body, so to speak. Right. Yeah, for sure. Tov, any other questions? These first few chapters are quite, like I said, they're more abstract than the rest of the chapters. Because again, this is kind of, this is talking about God's process of creating himself, so to speak, or creating his ability to express himself, in this proper way. But after the levels of Akudim, and Ikudim Brudim, once we start to get into the world of Atzilut, which is already now we consider it to be like the first real world that we are relating to Hashem with. And so there's a lot more order, and it just I don't know, it just makes a lot more sense. These happen to be very, very abstract, because when we're talking about applying this knowledge, and not just kind of the theory, not just learning about it, meaning when we start to apply this knowledge through the mitzvahs that we do, through the brachas that we make, we're pretty much using all of the structure from the world of Atzilut and below. Meaning that what is beyond in Adam Kadmon is not so it's not so present, I should say, in the Arizal system of Kabbalah. Meaning, why are we learning this theory? Why are we learning the structures of evolution of creation? One reason is to be able to know how God created the world, and you have to learn Torah, and this is an interesting Torah to learn. In addition to your Chumash, and in addition to your Gemara and to your Halacha class, this is also part of Torah, and it's a very big mitzvah to learn this, as the mystics say themselves. But in addition to that, when we start to apply the practical meditative components of the mitzvah, we want to put kavanah into the mitzvahs, then this becomes very, very relevant, very important for us to understand the mechanics of what is happening when I do a particular mitzvah versus that particular mitzvah. Yeah? So you're learning the structure, the infrastructure, and then when it actually comes down to time to put it into action, to put it into practice, it's much more you already know what you're doing, because you've learned the map. You understand how it's all been put together, and it's just a process of activating it and using it. So these levels, they seem to be quite abstract, I know, but it gets a lot easier as we progress. Tov. Any questions that need to be kind of wrapped up between the earlier chapters, upper tropes, middle tropes? So if we're going to talk about the meditations themselves, because even though these are not directly related to the mitzvahs that we're doing, there is the aspect of the Arizal system of the Yehudim and the meditations that we can use in relation to Adam Kadmon. So if we look at the structure, the code of what these levels are. So if you remember, we said there's Adam Kadmon, which we're going to refer to as Adam Kadmon, right? So we'll say there's the Or Ein Sof. Or Ein Sof is the infinite light, and that flows to Adam Kadmon. And we said the head of Adam Kadmon is the Ab of Adam Kadmon. Right? And now it's super important that everybody understands when we're talking about the name Ab, what are we referring to?
The infinite light and that comes from above that we don't understand.
Right, but the infinite light that is being channeled through this level called Ab. What's the level of Ab? It's the level of Chokhmah, but we're explicitly talking about this name. Okay? Never forget that, because sometimes, people, they have get into a habit of thinking that one of the names of God is called Hashem. Hashem is not one of God's names. I'm sorry to ruin your childhood education upbringing. Hashem is not one of God's names. Hashem, what does Hashem mean?
The name.
It's just the name.
The name.
Right.
Which name are you referring to?
There's many names, right?
You're referring to this name. He has many names, right? But you're referring to that name.
Right.
When you say Hashem, you mean the name. Not as opposed to like the other names that Hashem has, like Elohim, Shaddai, there's the 7 names that are not allowed to be erased. Yeah, that if you write them down, can't erase them, meaning they're holy names. So there's many names of God, but there's the name. Hashem, with like the capital Hey, definitive article, the name. That's the name we're talking about, okay? So Hashem is not one of Hashem's name. This name, what are they? They are numerical representations of divine names. Yeah? Ab is the numerical value 72, which is referring, okay? That is the name Ab. So every time we say the name Ab, you kind of want to like train yourself to be able to like visualize, to imagine that name, meaning Yud Kei Vav Kei expanded with the Yuds, and this is the name you're referring to. So when we're meditating, let's say on the head of Adam Kadmon, which is like the divine mind, right? At the level of the mouth, that's like the divine mouth. But imagine like the divine mind. Imagine like going into like God's head. Yeah? We can still meditate on it. It doesn't mean you will consciously be able to perceive or to attain, but you are definitely able to connect to it at that meditative state. Meaning there's your soul, there's a part of your personal individual neshama that is also rooted in Ab of Adam Kadmon. Because according to the Hasidic masters, all of the levels that we're talking about in the evolution of creation exist within you. Yeah? And so within you, you have your own personal Adam Kadmon, which we said relates to that singular collective divine consciousness within creation, or we call Mashiach consciousness, meaning Adam Kadmon is the neshama that all of reality is incorporated into. Yeah, we call that Mashiach. And so there's the mind of Mashiach. And so you can meditate on your own personal Mashiach. You can meditate on the aspect of you that is 100% divine, 100% godly. Yeah? And so that's called the Ab of Ak. And so the Ab of Ak is, again, we're talking about this particular name, Ab. Yeah? And then when we go down into, outside of the mind of Adam Kadmon, where begins the emanations of light, the expressions of light outside of Adam Kadmon, that's what we call, what do we call that? Oops. We call that Sag. Yeah? We call that Sag. Now, what is Sag? It is a numerical representation of this name, right? Sag is always the numerical 63, numerical representation of this name. This is the name which really represents the face of Adam Kadmon, where the openings are. Now we have light that is emanating out of Adam Kadmon. And we said the first emanation of Adam Kadmon is through the tropes, the te'amim, yeah, musical notation of how to read the Torah, and that is called Ab itself. So the highest levels of Sag is going to be Ab of Sag. Yeah? So it's kind of, it's an interesting exercise to meditate on the Sag, and then to kind of go within that name, and then to meditate on the Ab within the Sag. Yeah?
Can you repeat that?
Sure. It's kind of weird, I know, but think of, try and meditate on the Sag, the name Sag, right, which is this name, Yud Vav Daled Hey Yud, and Vav Aleph Vav Hey Yud. Just allow your mind to become absorbed and to be connected into that name, knowing that now this is the first level of expression of the divine light, yeah, through the face of Adam Kadmon. And now go inside of that and get a little bit more particular, and now meditate on the Ab within the Sag. It's kind of weird, it's a little tricky, but your mind is able to do that. Just like, when you dream, you can dream like impossible things. One of the metaphors that the Baal HaTanya brings is that you're able to dream, but when you dream, it's possible. You can imagine that. Can you imagine an elephant in the eye of a needle?
Sure.
Right? Can you imagine a bonfire burning in the middle of a swimming pool? You can imagine that thing, right? So here, imagine there's the name Sag, and now imagine there's an Ab within the Sag. Yeah? Which corresponds to the tropes, right? And then, it's like juggling. So you can start with throwing one ball in the air, and then you can add another ball in the air, and then you throw a third ball in the air, right? So now imagine like within the Ab of the Sag, we're gonna meditate on the first revelation of Hashem's light through the ears, which we said are the upper tropes, yeah? Which is the Sag of Ab.
Of Sag.
Of Sag, right? Because why is it not the Ab? The Ab is going to be the eyes, which we haven't spoken about yet. But retroactively, it'll just make a little bit more sense. But the point is, that the So the upper tropes. Whoa. The upper tropes. There's no real way to kind of like visualize this. There's no real way to visualize this linearly speaking, not like on a piece of paper, right? That's why many of the Kabbalistic academies that exist, they're they're focusing on what's in front of them and just kind of like mapping it out. But from the more Baal Shem Tov kind of perspective, as understanding the Arizal system as a meditative system of connecting to Hashem through this light, that it's not about just looking at the letters and the names and using it as kind of a map to be able to kind of draw light from one place to another place, but it's giving us a map to be able to focus our mind in order to be able to access these particular lights. If you can imagine, these lights exist right now. In some plane, in some dimension, they exist. The light of the ears of Adam Kadmon. So if I want to get to that place, what does the Arizal say you need to do? Meditate on the particular address of that place. How do I focus my mind and connect to that place? By meditating on the address of that place. The Baal Shem Tov says, you are where your thoughts are. Yeah? And the Reb Nachman comes along and says, so make sure your thoughts are where you want to be. Yeah? Because your mind can take you to all kinds of different places. And as Kabbalists, as Jewish mystics, that we want to focus our mind in the places that Hashem wants us to be. And there's nothing holier than focusing our mind and being with God. That's called being in a state of dveikut. Dveikut means a state of absorption where I'm totally absorbed in God. And so, well, wait, it's really great. But the Arizal is like, let's get a little bit more specific. We'll give you the keys to be able to actually open up these lights, open up these dimensions, so that you will be able to have the exact address to be able to get to where you want to be. By simply focusing your mind, you're there. And I think that's one of the main things that a lot of people have a hard time really understanding. In normal spirituality, regular spirituality, a lot of times people will gauge the success of a spiritual experience by how they feel. Right? If you kind of go back to the most spiritual experiences you've ever had, they were probably things that were very powerful emotionally, right? Physically, right? You felt it. It was very real. It was very present. So you're like, wow, that was such a great experience / trip, right? Whereas in Jewish spirituality, we understand that to the conscious experience as being related totally to the ego and to the aspect of what we call the animal drive, the animal soul, the self. Who was having that divine experience? The self was having that divine experience. The self was having that cosmic experience where I felt I was melting into all of creation and I just loved every single person, and I was able to forgive my mother for the way she treated me and when she ran me over with that car once upon a time. But it's the experience that a person feels that's like, wow, right? Who was having that experience? The self was having that experience, or what we call the nefesh b'amis, the animal soul, the ego. The ego was having that experience. The ego is in a state of total transcendence. Great. Along come the Jewish mystics, and they're like, well, you know, there's like a whole other layer to your being. You don't just have a self, you also have an aspect of no self. Whoa.
Is that like Ein Sof?
It's the Ein Sof within you, or we call the godly soul, the divine soul, the Nefesh Elokit.
So that's always having that experience. Essentially, that's always having that godly.
Currently, right now, it's only having that experience if you let it have that experience. You have to choose, right? So the metaphor we usually use is like the soul is imprisoned within the self. It's imprisoned within the ego, and you have to right? It's like every single, story, every single Disney story that ever existed. It's always about a princess, lost princess, it's like what's her name, Snow White, Rapunzel. It's always about that she's been kidnapped, the evil king has taken her, right? She's asleep, right? And then there's always some knight in shining armor.
Little set of needles.
That's right. There's always some knight in shining armor that has to return her. So if we get it more specific, so Rabbi Nachman has a very, very important story that I think everybody needs to read at least 10 times, which is the story of the lost princess. If you guys don't know it yet, get it. I think we might have it in English, but you can find it online. Super famous story. And basically, Reb Nachman just took all of Kabbalah and just wrapped it into this story. And the basic premise is there is a king, and he has a daughter, which he loves very much, but she was taken away, and now she's in a place of evil. And the king is very disturbed by this. And along comes the second in command. I don't know how you call them, the viceroy. I don't even know, what is a viceroy? I don't know what a viceroy is. But somebody that comes to the king and says, King, I will return the daughter to you. And he goes on this journey to search for the lost princess and to bring her back. Okay? Now this model is the exact model that we're talking about. Who's the princess? Your neshama, your soul. Yeah? And she's trapped in the place of evil. What is the place of evil? The place of evil? Ego, self, the body, right? And who's the viceroy? Well, that's essentially you. That's your conscious mind. You're the one that's making the choice. And so us choosing, right, to do a mitzvah or to learn Torah, we are essentially able to return the princess to the king.
That's
right?
unlocking keys to the...
It's you're giving the ability for the princess, for the soul, to become free once again and to return to her beloved. That's pretty much it. And you're the one that needs to make the choice, the decision, to be able to ego and the self. Or do we choose? Now it just so happens that you can do that whenever you want, wherever you want. But the what's the word? The catch. Yeah, there's a French word. It's what's the caveat? That's what it is. The caveat is that even though you can choose whenever you want to release the soul from the mind of the body and the self and connect back to its supernal source, the caveat is that you may or may not consciously experience and feel that. Why? Because the more rooted we are in ego, the more rooted we are in the self, then the harder it becomes for us to understand the language of the self and the way the self relates to the reality that I've experienced. And so when the soul is it's talking to God, I'm not hearing it. It's a totally different frequency that's just I'm not hearing it. It's what are those called? There's these parties where you have the headphones.
Silent disco.
Silent discos. Silent, Reuven, you party animal. Silent disco, right? Where you walk in and it's total silence, right? But everybody's jamming out, right? Why? Because they hear something you don't hear, right? And so it's not once upon a time they thought if you don't do mitzvahs, you're not going to get into Gan Eden, you're not going to go to the Garden of Eden, right? They're not going to let you in. That's not the way it works in this model. And this model doesn't matter even if you get in.
Still can't hear.
It's not going to do you any good. if you're not able to tune into that channel, you're not going to hear it. So you can choose whenever you want. The soul is like dance party USA. It's having a great time, right? But my conscious self may not totally be able to perceive that because of the over-identification with the self. And because all of my spiritual experiences were always only experienced through self. Right? And so what we're training ourselves to do is to, one, continuously give the soul the opportunity to reconnect to God, even though it's going to go like right back to its prison right afterwards. That doesn't matter. But we're giving that opportunity to be in that state of connection again and again and again and again, and at the same time disassociating ourselves from self and reassociating ourselves with that divine soul, and slowly purifying and refining the self to be able to allow that light to be able to pass. And you're like learning the language.
The more time you spend.
The more time you spend, and not just the more time, like the quantity, but the quality of time that you spend there. And this is like the ABCs of like the Baal Shem Tov system, where even like the simplest person could do like something, but they like reach like the highest levels of like of spirituality. Because this is now giving every single one of us the ability to have that connection, have that experience. And it doesn't mean that only if you spend the next 80 years learning Talmud every day for the rest of your life, then maybe, just maybe then you'll be able to do it. But you could do one mitzvah, but in the deepest way, in where you truly just you sacrifice yourself for that mitzvah, and that could open up the gates and bring like instant refinement. It says yesh shekone olamo b'sha'ah achat. There's a person who buys he attains his world, the world to come, the world of perception of the divine reality, in a single moment. And so. So as far as the meditative system that we're talking about, meditating on the name Sag, right? And then the Ab of Sag, and then the Sag of Ab of Sag is giving you a very, very direct address of a certain level, dimension of reality and godliness and divine light, that as soon as you meditate on that light, you are there. Your divine soul is there. And do not fall into that trap of what the evil pharaoh or that evil king is be like, it's not working. You're wasting your time. Yeah? Why? Because you're used to feeling it. You're used to experiencing it, right? You don't fall into that. Because one of the fundamentals that the Baal HaTanya teaches us is that no darkness can ever block out Hashem's light. And that no matter how coarse you are, no matter how animalistic, no matter how egotistical, no matter how involved you are and immersed in the body and the materiality of the physical world of self, nothing could ever prevent you from connecting to God. All you have to do is choose it. The simple action by doing it, having that intention, you're there. You're absolutely there. So by meditating on this and cultivating the understanding that I'm there, my just conscious self is not feeling it, that is going to fast track to open up incredible light to be able to flow into the conscious mind, and you're not even gonna recognize yourself in a month, 6 months, doesn't matter, just whatever the time is, because every time you do the meditation, every time you're meditating on Hashem's light, you're connecting, being absorbed in Hashem's light, it is illuminating, it is refining, it is rewiring and totally transforming you at the subconscious level. And all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're like, wow, I want something I never wanted before. Or wow, I want this thing a little bit less than I wanted yesterday. That's interesting. I didn't even talk to my therapist about that yet. It's not it's not a conscious transformation and healing, but it's like I call it a supraconscious healing and transformation. All of a sudden, it's reworking, it's changing your ratzon, it's changing your desires from the inside. You're not even aware of it, but it's happening slowly, again and again and again and again, day after day, bit after bit. Okay, Reuben. Wait, did that make any sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Anyway.
I'm wondering if I'm in the wrong track. Av and Sag, numerical representations of two different ways of writing Yud, A, Vav, A.
Right.
And in thinking about that, my mind just focuses on the one area of difference, the Vav.
Right. So you'd like to know why there is a difference?
And so, am I over-focused?
You're not over-focused. I mean, that's
Am I focusing
a
on
legitimate question.
detail?
That's a legitimate question. Obviously, all of Judaism, we were like super OCD about the details, right? Your tefillin's like a millimeter to the side. Sorry, no, not good, right? That's why you're gonna have like 15 people in the shul come up to you and be like, "Stop touching my head." It's about the details, you're right. And so yes, there is a very, very, very specific reason why the difference in levels is because of one letter. I wouldn't even, I was like, yeah. So maybe tomorrow we'll maybe we'll talk about like the difference between the four names. Ab, Zag, Ma, Ban. It's very deep, and when you understand, when you learn it, you're like, oh, yeah, totally, right? And that'll help you to be able to use those names later on in the meditation. Okay.
Question.
Yes.
Just for clarification, if we're at the level of Sag, we're calling it the base of Adam Kadmon combination, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we're at the Ab of Sag, wouldn't that put us at the eyes right away? So then if we go to the Sag of the Ab of Sag, or am I missing something? Is the Ab of Sag not the level of the eyes?
The Ab of Sag is not the level of the eyes. The Ab of Sag are the openings within the face of Adam Kadmon.
Got it. The Ab of the openings.
The ears. The eyes we're going to talk about after the mouth and after the creation of the vessels. Yeah. Now all of the light kind of like goes back in to the mouth of Adam Kadmon, and now it emanates out of the eyes. And now the light of the eyes are able to enter into the vessels that we just created. And then something cosmic happens. But
Just say stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Stay tuned.
Great.
There's a reason that he starts with the ears.
No, I'm with you.
Good.
I'm with you,
Okay.
just because we were doing the Sag.
They want to know everything on one leg. Good.
So when we're talking about the Ab of Sag, the Ab refers to the opening,
The Ab is the general. So we said, like, imagine like the big Sag is like the hotel Sag.
right?
Okay, and then you have 4 floors.
Right.
Yeah,
And so those
4 floors, and so like the penthouse floor in the Sag Hotel is Ab of Sag, the Tamim,
Okay.
and then we have the individual suites on that floor.
Right.
They're going to be the Ab Sag.
So, okay, great. I'll
Ab Sag
stay tuned. I
part, yeah.
want the gun.
Yeah. So when we get to the eyes, so the light of the eyes is actually already talking about the nikudot. Hold on. So stay tuned.
Yep. Stay tuned.
Yeah. Yeah. First, we got to make some vessels.
Great.
And then after we've created the vessels, right? Because when you kind of like have like enough data to be able to kind of step back and to like see everything like as a whole, it's just like, wow, it's a masterpiece. It's like how everything is just so precise, and how every step was such an integral part of the process. It's just absolutely fascinating. So I know it's kind of hard. You're getting lost in the details, and I know if you studied the Gemara with me. Don't get lost in the details. Gemara, details, but there's always like the beginning where the Gemara asks this one central question, right? And that's the question that we're trying to answer. That's like the main general question. And then the Gemara goes into all of these itty details. And after all these details, after like, maybe a page and a half of details, you kind of like, you step back a second, you're like, wait a second, where were we? What were we trying to do? You're like, oh yeah, we were trying to get to that original question, the answer to that original question. And so there's always this dynamic between like the idea, versus the details. The general versus the details. What we call chokhmah and bina. But it's challenging, just like learning the details, because you can get lost in the details. And so it's part of my job is to constantly remind you of what the actual, what's the goal here? What's the idea? Why are we learning this? Why am I getting so stuck in the details? So the eyes will come later.
The forest.
Yeah. Yeah. Tov. עד כאן.